Joining us now, 13-year NFL veteran offensive tackle, drafted by the Houston Oilers, went to the big game with the Tennessee Titans a little while ago. How would you say that the experiences have changed?
Well, I mean, it's a lot different culture nowadays with social media involved and the access that we have to players. The game that we played in Super 34 wasn't near as extravagant as Super Bowl 59, you know. Not only are there more eyeballs to the contest itself, but just the interaction with players, even opening night, and you and I were talking about that before the cameras came on, was vastly different in Atlanta in Super Bowl 34 where, sure, there were media blocks and, those factions had access to us, but not near the circus that you see today.
You didn't get proposed to?
No.
None of that kind of stuff?
No. Didn't
no
get
one
asked
throwing you cookies that are shaped like W's? Jameis was
never had a retired player throwing cookies at me either. Those actually look kind of good because I like shortbread cookies. So.
I mean, I could eat anything about now, so that's fine.
When you look around Radio Row and you see all the setups, $1 million setups here from all kinds of different corporations that are now engaged and involved in the whole process of the Super Bowl week, because it's not just one game anymore. It's the week leading up to the whole deal, so it's a big deal.
It's funny you point like that's just Media Row.
Yeah.
Right, like just all of the big fancy setups, and then we go to the stadium, and then we go downtown. Like it's wild.
Exactly. Well, back in the day, Radio Row was actually on the field where we were going to play the game. Mm-hmm. Now you don't even have access to it.
Yeah, you can't get on the grass.
I would say the circumstances nowadays, especially in this current environment we're talking about, probably don't lend to that kind of access. But it really just goes to show you how contained it actually was. Not everybody had a credential to come to Radio Row.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of people don't know what it's like to play in a Super Bowl. There's all the hoopla. Obviously, like you said, it's changed, but the game elongates. Everyone's pedal to the metal. Talk us through the mentality of going into a game.
Yeah, the difficult part about playing in a Super Bowl is not the X's and O's and who you're playing against, because in our Super Bowl, we had already played the Rams once during the regular season, right? But it was really more so the time that you had to deal with those things. Right. Halftime was a lot longer during a Super Bowl than it was during a regular season, which meant you're sitting around a little longer. Time for you to get cold, your muscles get stiff, Even the opening procession that leads into the game itself, because they're a lot more elongated than, say, a regular season game. Now, you did get to experience some of that in the playoffs, like an AFC or NFC championship game. You could see that with the television production involved, there's going to be a little bit more of a broadcast, right? But when you're just trying to keep things as focused and as not above the moment as any other game, it's kind of hard to do that, just given all the pomp and circumstance that comes along with playing in a Super Bowl.
Right.
Yeah. Do you? I'm sure you've talked about it ad nauseum this week, but do you have a favorite to win this game?
So I'm always, because I'm a lineman, I believe the most physical team will win.
Okay.
And when you have the best defense in the league, and when you have the best ground game in the league, it's hard to push against that. Okay. The Philadelphia Eagles in the trenches have the advantage, in my opinion. You got a tremendous offensive line, right, that works against a tremendous defensive line from size comparisons on a regular basis.
Right.
I'm not taking anything away from Chris Jones and George Karlaftis and players like that, but I'm Drew Tranquill, the guys that are in that front seven. But when you've got guys like Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith and these monsters that are going to be coming out and applying pressure.
Everywhere.
Exactly. And they got so many different ways to beat you. Now, the fact that, Steve Spagnuolo has an unbelievable scheme and the players trust and buy into what that scheme is, you would say that the discipline of the Kansas City Chiefs is what got them here.
Yep.
But it comes down to really the physical hat-on-hat kind of situations. And, I would say that the Philadelphia Eagles, in my opinion, even though they're an underdog, especially with Saquon Barkley and that home run hitting capability, they have just as good a chance to stop Patrick Mahomes from making history.
Especially against the run defense, the way that the Chiefs have been playing. Like, if you're to isolate an area of the game where there's a weaker unit, it would probably be the Chiefs' run defense. For me, and so that's not a good marriage.
And then if we dig a little bit deeper into that trenches matchup, you play tackle. It's very likely that the Eagles have two Hall of Fame tackles in Mailata and Lane Johnson.
Absolutely. I mean, Lane for sure. George Mailata has played right tackle before moving to left, so it's not like they don't have the experience. They've already substituted for Cam Jurgens, who's filling in for a Pro Bowler or a Hall of Famer himself, in Jason Kelce, and he's done a tremendous job as a second-round pick in 2022. But the fact that they've been able to even fill in those spots where they needed to But then again, the Kansas City Chiefs have done the same thing. You see George Thuney moving from left guard, and having Mike Caliendo come in and fill in for him, and he's moved out to tackle, a position that they were having problems with,
Big
right?
problems.
You rarely see that. I mean, you see
Guard to
in
tackle?
draft time,
Right.
you see tackle to guard.
Yes.
But guard to tackle?
But it just shows you his versatility.
Yeah.
And while we're talking about, Jalen or Saquon Barkley possibly beating Terrell Davis's record, he just needs 30 yards to rush for more yards than he had during the postseason, right? It is broken.
Yeah.
There's no way that Saquon Barkley is not going to get 30 yards. That's a down game for him.
Pour one out for
completely.
you, TD.
So you're talking about the Chiefs possibly winning 3 in a row, right? But why are we not talking more about Joe Thuney, who has blocked for 2 of the game's greats, Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes? Okay, has Super Bowl rings with both of those dynasty situations. Remember what the Patriots did in helping Tom Brady win all those rings. Guess what? Joe Thuney was there. Same situation we're talking about here, where Patrick Mahomes could probably make history, or possibly make history. Joe Thuney making an adjustment to move out of position to help them do that. So I think we should give more linemen a little bit more credit for being as versatile and doing what they do.
By the way, this year, one of the big offseason storylines, and was during the season too, is the running back resurgence. My argument is I don't actually think that it resurged the way that people think. I think that they went to teams that have insane offensive lines.
Exactly.
Like if you're Saquon Barkley and you're in New York behind that offensive line and a team that isn't really there are lots of problems there, then that affects even his stats. He did not look like this last year. I think if he'd stayed in New York, he wouldn't look like this in New York this year. There's no doubt that him being behind that specific offensive line, I feel like that's like the perfect pairing. You take an elite running back and you can pay that elite running back if you have an elite offensive line.
Yeah.
Now we're talking.
Well, first off, it might sound narcissistic coming from an offensive lineman to say this, but the offensive line is the most important position on the football field.
Definitely.
Because it doesn't matter if your quarterback can hit a dime on a Hawk's head.
Yep.
If he doesn't have time to throw the football, then guess what? He's in trouble. Running backs are the same situation. We had 2 scenarios where backs went to different franchises the next year and looked completely different. Derrick Henry leaving Tennessee and going to Baltimore had a tremendous year rushing for 2,000 yards, just like he did back in the day when they had a more stable offensive line in Tennessee. So it really comes down to the big bodies up front, being able to find and make those holes that running backs can take advantage of, but also giving a quarterback the type of protection that he needs to be able to execute the plays that are called.
Exactly, and you talk about the offensive line. You're the only person on the field who does not have to depend on anyone else other than your fellow offensive linemen to do their job. Lane Johnson has to do that all the time. He's on the island all the time, they say. Chris Jones went up against Deion Dawkins last week. Now it seems like Chris Jones is going to be on the island with Lane Johnson this week. What do you think about that matchup? And, it's going to be a primo matchup. It's going to probably, control how Jalen Hurts does during this game.
Well, the smart offensive lines don't ever really match up mano-a-mano very long, because in the end, for a defensive lineman to rush the passer, it's his advantage. I can't see where the quarterback's at. I can only do, my play design and hope that everything doesn't, break down, and that way I'm able to stay consistent in my blocking. But what we do as a group, right, is if I'm not blocking anybody, I'm looking at where areas could be problematic.
Finding
work. Right. If I'm the left guard, I'm going to save space with my center to make sure that the interior linemen don't take advantage of him. But I'm also looking at Chris Jones going up against Lane Johnson and making sure that if he does get beat inside, guess what? I leave that situation and go help here. That's what linemen continue to do. They're the most positions on the line, 5 of us, right? And we don't leave the field ever.
Yep.
Sam, we don't ever leave the field.
Right.
So we're matching 60, 70 plays when we get out there. So the consistency comes from our offense being able to execute, but that really starts with the big bodies up front.
Okay, last question. I know you've got a million places that you need to be, but I want to ask about Caleb Williams, because one of the things that I've been talking about this week that I think, and I want to get your thoughts, is that I think one of the easily identifiable ways that he needs to get better is to get the ball out faster. Like the pressure rate is high. The time to pressure is one of the longest time to pressures in the NFL. That to me tells a Caleb story, that he's holding onto the ball too long, the time to throw, all that kind of stuff. Is that what you see, or do you see something similar to that when you watch his game?
It comes to trust and decision making. Okay, decision making in that I have a progression that I'm going through. If that receiver isn't getting off coverage like he should for me to be able to deliver the ball properly, I then have to make a decision to get off of him and go through my second, my third, and if I have time, my fourth read, right?
But they have good wide receivers. Is that what you were seeing?
Okay, well, you know what?
No?
If we have good wide receivers, then why aren't they open immediately when I drop back?
Okay.
Because when my back foot hits, I'm expecting to release this football. I don't want to sit back there and wait for you to get out of,
Right.
for you to get uncovered, right? So there's a lot of things that play into him holding onto the football.
Yeah.
The coverage that's being ran, right? Sometimes defenses do a great job of disguising what they're doing and baiting quarterbacks into making that errant throw that creates a turnover. Of course, you got to navigate the pressure that comes up front in the pocket from the defensive front. But for the most part, receivers got to run right routes. And when I throw you the dang ball, you got to catch it.
Right.
Well,
That's
there's
another
that.
thing, too. So, but decision making also helps speed up that process. If I've seen so many different things to where I'm not fooled by what the defense is doing me, and I've got a guy that I can trust throwing the football, I'll get that thing out of my hands quickly.
Brad Hopkins, where can people find you on Sirius? Give us the
Sirius
hours.
XM, channel 88, 9 to 1. That's 10 to 2 Eastern Standard Time on Sunday mornings.